Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and today we're deck teching a super fun tribal deck. Let me hear your Minotaur roar. One of the things I wanted to do when putting together a Minotaur deck is to think about the strengths and weaknesses of the meta of Standard itself. Most of the top decks are mid-range, like Temur Aetherworks Marvel and Blue-Red Control. But others are insanely low to the ground, quick decks like Mono Black Zombies, Red-White Humans, and Mardu Vehicles. The goal was to try and stand our ground against both metas while presenting a board presence that has the capacity to win the game against them. Did we succeed? Well, I'd like to think so. But just like the cat tribal deck we talked about last week, I would feel real bad for you if you brought this to a PTQ. So, with that being said, let's get started on creatures. Since we want to keep this a tribal deck that is nothing but Minotaurs here, a total 4 of a Metallic Mimic is the only exception. Pumping your board state and requiring a removal spell early in the game, this guy can ramp your powerful Minotaurs into back-breaking threats. If this doesn't die to a Fatal Push, Magma Spray, or Harness Lightning early, consider the advantage yours. Another 4 of is the devastating Bloodrage Brawler. Being a 4/3 with barely a downside is crippling in the early game. This dude just runs over any threat Mono Black Zombies and Aetherworks has at this point in the game. Play it with a Mimic on board, say hello to a 5/4 for 2. Just sick. But those 8 are all we have for 2 drops for creatures. Moving on to 3 drops, we've got a 2 of Minotaur Sureshot. You'll learn that fire breathing comes in handy in the late game, and the only thing this deck is susceptible to is flying creatures. This fixes that, as well as being a Minotaur. Not too bad. Following that, we've got the ridiculous 4 of Ahn-Crop Crasher. This Minotaur does not joke around. It does serious work. While having haste itself, it can make a creature not be able to block with its exert mechanic. That can sometimes end a game just the way you want it. And lastly, we can't forget about the Minotaur Lord of Amonkhet, Neheb the Worthy, a total 4 of here. Now, you may be saying, 4 of? Wouldn't that be too much for a legendary creature? And I say, no way. Have you seen the removal in Standard? This glass cannon of a creature is the immediate target of any removal spell the minute it hits the field. In the early game, it gives your board first strike, but in the late game, it can make your creature so large that it's basically impossible to win against in a 1-on-1 matchup. Making the Brawler a 6/3 first striker is deadly. When Neheb also gets in, he makes both players discard a card. In our deck, that's usually no big deal, as we're trying to swing out as often as possible. But for our opponent, that makes dealing with him that much more stressful. A great lord for Minotaurs, and just straight up oppressive when it hits on the board. Neheb beats every matchup with Mardu Vehicles, Zombies, etc. if he stays on the board. Moving to the last 4 creatures and 4 drop in the deck, we've got a total of 4 copies of Ondu Champion. In the mid game, we sometimes run up against a lot of mana dork blockers, and we need to get through them to do damage. This helps us out. You basically use this as a spell rather than a creature, but if you can play these back to back, it's usually the end of the game. Moving on to spells, we've got a giant load of removal spells to get creatures out of the way so we can get in for damage. 3 Fatal Push and 3 Galvanic Bombardment are here to knock out of the way Mana Dorks, Crypt Breakers, and any other creature in our way. We want to make sure Mardu Vehicles and Mono Black Zombies doesn't stabilize, and these help us do that. We also have a 4 of Fiery Temper and 2 Key to the City. While also being able to hit the opponent directly, it's a great discard outlet for our Brawler and Key on turn 3, to be able to ping a 3 toughness creature or in the game with those 3 extra points of damage. Lastly, the more in-your-face removal is Unlicensed Disintegration, a total 4 of. Having the Mimic and the Key in our deck makes the likelihood of dealing an additional 3 damage to our opponent very favorable. So, to recount, we have a total 14 pieces of potential removal spells in the deck. A gummy board state is something we can't deal with, so we need to get through as fast as possible. Moving on to lands, we've got 2 Aether Hubs, 4 Foreboding Ruins, and 3 Smoldering Marshes. This list was actually a bit bigger with playsets of the Marsh and even the new Cycle lands from Amonkhet here, but tapped lands are what this deck detests. The Aether Hub comes in instead to help stabilize and get creatures and spells out more quickly. And of course, we've got 8 mountains and 5 swamps. Now, onto the sideboard. To deal with more creatures, we've got 1 more Galvanic Bombardment and 2 of Final Reward. Exiling creatures is a real thing these days, and this 5-mana removal spell helps in the fight against a god or Ulamog. To deal with Temur Aetherworks Marvel and Red-Blue Control, we've got a 2 of Transgress the Mind and 2 Never to Return to deal with Planeswalkers and Gearhulks. Speaking of Gearhulks, we have a 2 of Release the Gremlins as well. However, a Dispossess may be a better fit here in the meta, since it does hit all subsequent copies, but it just doesn't hit it on the battlefield, and that can also be good against Mardu Vehicles. Besides Dispossess, we've got a 2 of Lost Legacy to hit our Ulamog and Liliana's Mastery in the Mono Black Zombie matchup. Liliana's Mastery can mean the game for you in a battle of creatures, so we want to make sure in game 2 that that does not hit the field. Finally, to deal with large, overflowing board states, we've got 2 Sweltering Suns to deal with zombies, tokens, and even Aetherworks Marvels, Refiners, and Mana Dorks. The final 2 cards, Insult to Injury. New Perspectives is now a deck, and they love to slow down the tempo with fog cards that prevent damage. Well, they're in for a rude awakening with Insult's effect, doubling the damage that they take and making the damage unpreventable. A great way to close the deal against that type of deck. And that is it! The best part of this deck is that it's fairly cheap. Around 45-ish tickets at MTGOtraders.com. Fatal Push and Metallic Mimic being the money cards in the deck, of course. You could replace Fatal Push with 3 Magma Spray if you want to save some money, but Fatal Push is just too good not to include. We'll be putting out some gameplay videos soon, so keep an eye out for them. This deck does good work, and I can't wait to show it off to you. Let's go Minotaurs! Hey, you've reached the end screen. Thanks for watching this. If you liked the video, hit that like button and leave a comment on what deck we should do a deck tech on next. We'd love to hear your feedback. As always, subscribe to MTGO Traders for more news, deck techs, and gameplay videos you can shake a pithing needle at. See you in the next video.